And at long last, we have come to the final Star Wars rewrite, The Rise of Skywalker, and boy howdy have we got a lot to unpack with this one. Couple of obvious disclaimers: if you haven't seen the previous videos, like my rewrites of Force Awakens and Last Jedi, you're going to be totally lost going into this, so you're better off going ahead and watching them first. Needless to say, I do take a lot of liberties with the original films. Also, please bear in mind this is just my own personal interpretation of how Rise of Skywalker should have gone, as per my own personal opinion. I know there was that script that was leaked a little while ago as to what Rise of Skywalker was originally going to be, but I'm not really going to be pulling from that. Also, this is going to be split into two parts, bear in mind, just because I've got a lot of college work on my shoulders right now and I'm having to balance that with writing and recording these videos as well as editing it, so please be patient while I'm trying my best to come out with these videos as often as I can. If you're still here, I'm assuming you're all caught up, so in the words of the great Darth Wallace,
"It's no use prevaricating about the bush."
Let's go ahead and get started. So in the last film, we had the First Order blowing up Coruscant and the other central planets of the galaxy. Rey ended up joining Kylo Ren in order to save Finn, Poe, BB-8, Chewbacca, Leia, and the others, and the rest of the ships that the Republic had at its disposal. So how do we open up this one after that downer of a movie? Well, I'm as big a fan of training montages as the next guy, so why don't we go ahead and start there. In the depths of Starkiller Base, which has now become the official seat of the First Order's power, Rey continues her lightsaber and force training alongside the other Knights of Ren as Kylo Ren observes and gives them directions. While she demonstrates a keen aptitude in the ways of the dark side, Kylo senses that she's still holding back the bulk of her power, as demonstrated when he steps in midway through the training session and knocks her on her ass. "You took my hand and joined the dark side," he says, "but you're still clinging to what you knew before. It's high time you let go of the old ways. How else can we hope to build anything new with this opportunity that's been presented for us?" Once the training is concluded, Supreme Leaders Kylo and Rey set about the business of consolidating their power over the galaxy. While several of the central planets are gone and the First Order are the ones in charge, they've still got a hell of a job ahead of them cleaning up the remnants of the Republic before they can properly relax. As Kylo Ren puts it, they've got the power, now they have to find a way of keeping it. Kylo assembles the Knights of Ren and the Dark Council to plan their strategy. Most of the assemblage are, unsurprisingly, thinking in more aggressive terms. The Knights of Ren suggest an immediate sweep through the galaxy, using their fleet to intimidate any who stand in their way and turning Starkiller Base's cannon on those who resist. Seeking another opinion, Kylo asks Rey for hers, as she's been remarkably silent up to this point. She suggests that they proceed with caution rather than use brute force in order to achieve their ends. She compares taking the galaxy to the wild beasts that she used to tame on Jakku with the Force. You can't dominate an animal's will all at once and expect it to remain loyal. You ease it into complacency, give it time to adjust until it's ready to submit. Once that happens, it will follow you unquestioningly for the rest of time, and they must treat the galaxy the same way. They may now have the power to decimate entire systems at will, but what good is that power when all it'll do is make martyrs of the dead and bolster support for the rebels? The people need to appreciate the order and stability of the First Order instead of just cowering at the fear and terror that they inspire. Kylo concurs with her point, telling the Dark Council and the other Knights of Ren to send communications far and wide throughout the galaxy, trying to win the support of as many planets as they can. This establishes the dynamic between Kylo Ren and Rey throughout this movie. Both of them are at something of a tipping point when it comes to the light side and the dark side of the Force. Kylo is, of course, veering very heavily into the dark, while Rey is alternating back and forth, unsure of what path she's going to take. Every time Kylo risks fully embracing the dark side, Rey steps in to pull him back. She's his conscience, his Jiminy Cricket. Now, whether or not she'll actually succeed in bringing him fully to the light side, we'll get into that later. For the moment, we cut over to one of the Dark Council's representatives as his ship departs Starkiller Base as he goes on his way to complete his mission. He drops out of hyperspace only to find, whoops, Finn and Poe are waiting for him. They attack his ship, take out his guards, kidnap him as a hostage, and then jump into hyperspace. On their way to meet the Resistance, we get some info filling us in what's been going on in between the movies. Finn and Poe are looking a little bit older, a little bit more seasoned, they're a little grimier and dirtier than the previous films. Maybe they've got a scar or two here or there. We can see just from the state of them that they aren't doing so good in this fight. As the First Order grows more and more powerful every day, support for the Old Republic continues to wither and die. The good guys have gotten so desperate here that they've taken to kidnapping members of the Supreme Leader's Dark Council to gain an advantage. They hop out of hyperspace, arrive at an isolated space station that's secretly operated by the Resistance. As Poe makes it clear, this is not their actual base of operations. If they let slip where the Resistance is hiding, all the bad guys need to do is turn Starkiller Base vaguely in their direction and destroy every planet in the vicinity. A lot more worlds would get blown up, sure, but the First Order would guarantee that their enemies are obliterated. Finn, Poe, and BB-8 bring their new hostage to their contact, who turns out to be none other than Maz Kanata from Force Awakens. She's been running this little station for a while, keeping her loyalty to the Resistance under wraps so as not to alert the First Order about their presence. They meet discreetly to discuss tactics, with Poe suggesting that they interrogate the hostage, which of course puts Maz and Finn a little on edge. Poe has gotten a lot more brutal since the events of the last movie. But before they can do anything else, a Star Destroyer arrives at the station carrying a ton of stormtroopers and one of the Knights of Ren, who are basically acting as enforcers for the First Order, kind of like a whole gang of Darth Vaders. They sweep through the station looking for the kidnapped Dark Council member and question Maz if she's seen anything suspicious. She denies everything, of course, but this doesn't stop the First Order from tearing the place apart in their search. Finn, Poe, and BB-8 try to escape with the hostage, only to get discovered by one of the stormtroopers. He tries to alert the others, but Finn wrestles with him, giving the others the time to run to a nearby shuttle. Finn catches up with his mates with Maz's help, and they all escape the station in the nick of time. Little do they know, however, that the stormtrooper that Finn fought with has stowed away on board and triggered a little beacon for the First Order to follow. Meanwhile, the Supreme Leaders arrive on the Sith homeworld of Korriban, as Kylo Ren has gotten himself a little hobby of collecting Jedi and Sith artifacts. Rey doesn't really have to ask in order to find out why. He's looking to increase his power by any means necessary, but Kylo refutes her point that blindly seeking power for power's sake was the way of the old Sith. He wants to create something else, something new. That's how he views the First Order, the chance to start again from scratch without blind allegiance to any order or government. This is when we get a little insight into Kylo Ren's personal ideology. In effect, it's the ultimate expression of the let the past die philosophy that we heard in Last Jedi. He doesn't want to recreate the Sith or get revenge on the Jedi, he wants to create something of a merger of the two. No more division, no more infighting, a truly unified order, a unified galaxy under his and Rey's heels. The pair land on the planet and begin their search, but the two become separated pretty quickly, and Rey begins to hear a voice. At first she thinks it's Luke's ghost, and then she hears another voice, then another, then another. Soon she and the audience realizes that it's the spirits of the ancient Sith talking to her, and before long they just start screaming at her, yelling at her. Concentrating and digging into her strength in the Force, she snaps herself out of the vision as Kylo Ren shakes her awake. Finding no remaining artifacts, they leave the planet and head back to their personal Star Destroyer. Rey is naturally a little bit shaken up from the experience, whereas Kylo, despite being glad that her connection to the dark side is becoming stronger, is a little bemused why the spirit spoke to her instead of him. Between the two of them, he was the first one to study the Sith's teachings after all. He is the stronger in the dark side, so why don't the ancient Sith speak to him? And it feels like jealousy. Cutting away from them, we see Finn, Poe, BB-8, and Maz making their way across the galaxy to the Resistance homeworld when, surprise, the rogue stormtrooper attacks them. They manage to overpower the soldier, ripping his helmet off and revealing that he's just a kid no older than 16 or 17. Finn has the boy at gunpoint, but despite Poe's insistence, he doesn't open fire. He insists on keeping him alive and bringing him with them. And of course, this pisses off Poe quite a bit. He searches the trooper, finds the beacon that he's been using to signal to the First Order where they're going, and then immediately goes to kill him. Finn intervenes, however, and they get into a little scuffle, which Maz thankfully snaps them out of. Poe demands an explanation as to why Finn is going so easy on this kid, and he responds by saying, "We're not killing children." There is of course a deeper meaning behind this, as Finn is staring at this young stormtrooper who's just glaring angrily back at him, but we're not going to get into that right now. Just as cooler heads are starting to prevail, the Lord that they have as a hostage gets free of his bonds and immediately tries to take control of the ship's helm. They careen across space, spinning wildly out of control before crash landing on a jungle planet far below. We learn later that this is actually Duxon, one of the moons of Onderon, which is a name that hardcore Star Wars fans will probably recognize. But cutting back to Starkiller Base, Rey is resting in her private chambers when she's visited by yet more voices in her head. Eager to make sense of the voices and unable to help her curiosity, she pays a visit to Kylo's collection of Sith and Jedi artifacts and finds herself drawn to one in particular, the helmet of Darth Vader. She hears the sound of faint breathing, which we, the audience, recognize all too well, before she's interrupted by one of the Knights of Ren. They share a few words, maybe the Knights have misgivings about Rey being named Joint Supreme Leader by Kylo. As ever is the case with the dark side, it will always attract those who desire power, and the Knights of Ren are no exception. The Knight outright says that they want what Rey has, what she has no right to have. They've been fighting along Kylo's side for a lot longer than she has, and as a result of that, they all feel like they individually should be the Supreme Leader alongside him. Rey puts him in his place, however, by letting loose a little flash of the dark side, probing the Knight's mind and giving us a little insight into the person that he was before he joined the First Order. We could get a few visions of him as a boy training alongside Ben Solo before they became the Knights of Ren. Just a scared little boy who wants to feel strong, Rey calls him. This of course provokes him, they draw their lightsabers, but Kylo Ren arrives and stops the fight from breaking out amongst his prized collection. Now that cooler heads have prevailed, the Knight informs Rey and Kylo about the kidnapping of a Dark Council member, as well as a rebel uprising on a nearby space station. Thankfully, one courageous trooper stowed aboard the perpetrator's vessel as they escaped and triggered a beacon, and this is the chance for the First Order to learn the location of the rebels. The three head to Starkiller Base's hangar, being greeted by Captain Phasma along the way, who is now sporting a shiny robotic hand after losing it to Finn in the last film. Phasma informs them that the last known location of the signal was nearby the Onderon system, which just so happens to be one of the systems that Kylo planned to search for more Sith artifacts. Kylo commands Phasma and the Knights of Ren to accompany them with a squadron of stormtroopers to follow the signal and find the rebels. Meanwhile, our little rebellious team wake up on the surface of Duxon, the nearby moon of Onderon, and fortunately manage to escape their wrecked ship before it blows up. Unfortunately, we see that Mars has sustained significant wounds during the crash and needs immediate assistance. Only problem is, the moon is mostly a jungle wasteland with few, if any, intelligent beings known to still live there. Nonetheless, they begin their journey to try and find whatever help they can. On the way, we get a few tense conversations between Finn, Poe, and the Stormtrooper and the Dark Council member. We even learn the bad guys' names, Lord Talos and DN3698. We see a little bit of character explored here. Maybe we get a chance to humanize the people that we just dismissed as evil beforehand. Maybe, despite his dismissiveness and very arrogant attitude, Lord Talos makes a few half-decent points about the Republic and the First Order, arguing that, in the end, we're only really on our own side, and that if put in the same position and given the same level of power, Poe or Finn would do exactly the same thing as him or anyone else in the First Order. Finn, meanwhile, talks to DN, the Stormtrooper, trying to convince him that what he's been brought up to believe is a lie, but the young trooper remains stubbornly unmoved, like any self-respecting little space Nazi. One thing Finn could mention that might cause the boy to doubt his training is the chip implanted in all Stormtroopers' heads. Remember, that was something that we went over in Force Awakens. While the trooper tries to shrug off the statement, saying that it's only necessary to keep unruly troopers like Finn in line, we see that his faith has started to shake just a little bit. Cutting back to the bad guys, Rey, Kylo, Phasma, and the other Knights of Ren arrive in the Onderon system, and Rey suggests that they split up, her and Kylo going to Onderon itself, and Phasma and the others heading to the moon above the planet. The Supreme Leaders land on the desolate world and encounter the abandoned city of Isis. Suddenly they find themselves surrounded by hordes of strange red-skinned creatures, descendants of the Sith subspecies known as the Massassi. This launches us into a battle between Rey, Kylo, and the vicious animals, with the Supreme Leaders eventually coming coming out on top. They scare the creatures away and enter the city's main temple built centuries ago by the ancient Sith Lord Freedon Nad. They search the building for treasure, and Rey finds herself called to one particular mound of rubble and finds, sure enough, an ancient rusted dagger pulsating with dark side energy, one which belonged to Freedon Nad. This would be a nice little Easter egg for hardcore Star Wars fans, as well as a chance to really expand the world of Star Wars for people who have only really watched the movies but never really delved into the extended lore all that much. Kylo demands that she hand the blade over, but before she does, Rey asks what he thinks will really come about from collecting all these trinkets. Kylo tries to lay her concerns to rest by saying that it's not just a collection of seeking power and knowledge for himself, but also preventing it from falling into anyone else's hands. How can they hope to attain their perfect galaxy, the slate wiped clean of the Jedi and Sith's past influence, if there is a chance that someone else, some other ambitious nutjob, may come about and try to find the artifacts and use their power to begin the war between the light and the dark side all over again? Rey, however, remains unconvinced and continues to push and prod by asking questions, but Kylo suddenly snaps at her to just be silent. Again, we're seeing a little bit of that jealousy come through in our boy here, and it's only about to get worse. Rey refuses to be silenced by Kylo's outburst, and she snaps back, summoning a little dark side energy and causing the rubble around them to shake and shudder. Soon enough, the entire temple starts collapsing, and the pair make a quick escape before they get buried. Berating her on her loss of control, Kylo sets on back to the ship, with Rey following behind, but not before she captures a glimpse of a hooded figure in the far distance of the abandoned city. We don't know who it is, but before Rey can get a nice proper look at it, it vanishes, and she is forced to follow Kylo Ren back to the ship. Meanwhile, the Rebel Patrol is still making its way through the jungles on Doxon when they are surrounded by a group of actual honest-to-goodness human beings. While tribal and primitive, they demonstrate a keen understanding of both their own world and the nearby planet of Onderon. Turns out that they've been stuck on this pit of a moon for generations ever since the ancient Sith Lord Freedon Nad was initially deposed. While initially hostile to the outsiders, particularly the alien Maz Kanata, Finn eventually convinces them to heal her in exchange for helping them get off the moon. He of course leaves out the little bit of information that their ship was totaled, but as he says to Poe, they'll cross that bridge when they get to it. As they help heal the injured alien, the tribesmen and women explain a bit more about the history behind Doxon and its mother world of Onderon. Centuries ago, Freedon Nad sought to create his own empire, independent of the Jedi and the Sith orders, reminding you of anyone? And dominated his homeworld of Onderon as a starting point. Unfortunately, despite amassing a cult on the planet and the nearby moon, the Dark Lord died and was entombed in his own temple, the same temple that we just saw Rey and Kylo in. Centuries passed and the remaining humans left on Onderon formed their own civilization independent of Jedi or Sith influence, but then a new Dark Lord came, a new Emperor. Palpatine's empire swept through the galaxy, eventually reaching Onderon, seeking the same powers that Kylo Ren would eventually seek when he takes control of the First Order. Anyone on the planet that got in their way, including the entire city of Isis, they were either killed, enslaved, or exiled to the nearby moon, eventually making up the very tribes that our heroes are speaking to right now. This exchange gives us a lot of potentially juicy material for the plot. For one, it gives us and the heroes a little bit of world-building exposition. Hardcore Star Wars fans may have heard of Freedon Nad, but not all of them, and it would be cool to see some of his stuff explored in movie form. Also, it provides an opportunity for character growth in the case of the Dark Council member Lord Talos and the Stormtrooper DN3698. They're seeing some of the larger knock-on effects of galactic empires like the one that they serve. These people were dispersed from their home after watching their loved ones get slaughtered by the First Order's predecessor. The effects of any empire's cruelty isn't just limited to the here and now, it extends out far further into the future than anyone can possibly see. There's also another little tease for Kylo Ren's plan, with the mention of Palpatine visiting Onderon at one point while he was alive, but we'll get to that later. For right now, let's return to the action. Our hero's conversation is interrupted by the sudden arrival of Captain Phasma, the Knight of Ren, and a whole squadron of stormtroopers. We could get a cool stealth scene as Poe, Finn, and the others hide in the jungle from them, picking them off silently one by one. Poe signals to the others to help hijack the First Order ship so that they can escape the planet with the tribesmen, and they move to do so right before Lord Talos yells out and blows their cover. Phasma descends on the party with the troopers and lets loose a whole hail of laser fire before one shot hits Lord Talos right in the gut. He dies is in DN3698's arms and, distraught at failing his mission to protect the council member's life, calls for the troopers to hold their fire, but they don't. They just keep on coming as the good guys try to escape. They don't even care that one of their own is caught in the crosshairs or that they killed the very man that they presumably were sent to rescue. Their only interest is capturing the rebels. This is the point where we see DN really begin to doubt his beliefs, but he doesn't really have time to dwell on this sudden revelation as Finn grabs him by the collar and pulls him back towards the hijacked vessel. They and the few tribesmen who managed to survive the altercation escape the moon, but not before a certain other vessel occupied by Rey and Kylo Ren cuts across their path. This could lead to a really cool exchange where Rey sees Finn, Poe, Maz, and BB-8 through the viewport of her ship. This is the first time that they've seen each other since the events of the previous film. Naturally, they're all feeling a little bit shaken, except for Kylo, who aims his ship's blaster right at them, ready to shoot them out of the sky. Rey tries to stop him, but he force pushes her back, letting his jealousy fuel his power and slipping that much further into the dark side. He readies the cannons again, about to fire, when a new but very familiar voice appears in his head. His mother, Leia, imploring him to stop. This causes him to hesitate, stunned by her voice appearing suddenly to him, and inadvertently gives Rey the chance to pull their ship away with the Force, giving Finn and Poe and the others a chance to escape. Kylo furiously berates Rey on interfering, and she shouts back, saying that he was the one who hesitated and she simply took advantage by defending her friends. He ignites his lightsaber, saying that he should bring her in and imprison her in Starkiller Base, but she rebuffs him by igniting her own lightsaber and reminding him that they're both supreme leaders. How would it look to the troops if one brought back the other in handcuffs? Wouldn't that simply be one Force user turning on another for the sake of their own gain, effectively repeating the same cycles of the Sith that Kylo is looking to distance himself from? Bitterly, he puts his lightsaber away and takes the ship into land on Duxon to pick up Phasma and the others. Meanwhile, Finn comforts the young stormtrooper, who is now very severely traumatized, on board their stolen ship as Poe and Maz try to come up with a plan. DN is obviously a bit shaken up after watching his own people fire on him. Finn gives him some helpful advice as an ex-stormtrooper himself, saying that even though you dedicate yourself to something or someone, it doesn't necessarily mean that that thing or person will dedicate itself to you. In the end, as Lord Talos had said, maybe we are just all in this for ourselves. But with that in mind, that doesn't mean we don't have a choice about who we can follow alongside. Finn then concludes by saying that if DN wants to leave the First Order, the Republic can help by removing the chip in his brain. But that doesn't mean that he owes the Republic his allegiance or that he's obligated to fight the First Order. Finn's whole point about freedom and free will is that if he wants to have his own life, his own name, his own home, his own identity, he can. No one, not even the First Order, can really take that freedom away from him. DN acknowledges his point and asks to be called Dan from now on, essentially choosing his own name the same way Finn did. From here, we're seeing Finn's character arc come full circle. In the first film, in Force Awakens, we see him overcome his servitude to an order that he doesn't want to serve. In the second film, we see him question his new blind faith to the Republic. And by the third film, he's teaching others like him to think for themselves, which is essentially what he's been learning to do throughout this whole trilogy. Think for himself. In a sense, that's kind of what all the characters are trying to do. But cutting back to the action, they continue on their way, unsure of what to do next when a small signal appears enticing the good guys to follow. They do so and wind up suddenly surrounded by ships on all sides. Poe reassures his friends to stand down and relax, he knows who's manning those ships, and sure enough, as the intruders board, we get the reveal that it's actually none other than Zori Bliss, the smuggler who betrayed Poe in the last film. At first, she and her criminal buddies hold our heroes at gunpoint, threatening to take them captive, when she breaks ranks and goes to hug her old friend. She and Poe have actually been in communication for some time, with Zori helping to bring the galaxy's criminal contingent together against the First Order. As she puts it, turns out when you throw your chips in with an evil empire, that evil empire may try whatever they can to keep you in your place. Not a lot of criminals have groaned to that idea while the First Order have been in charge. Also, next surprise, it turns out that she's had some help along the way and she steps aside to reveal none other than Lando Calrissian accompanying her. Personally, I kind of found Lando's inclusion in Rise of Skywalker forced, no pun intended, but here I think it would make a little bit more sense. He wouldn't just show up out of the blue in some random planet then just happen to reappear again at the very end in the final battle. He's been involved in this new rebellion for some time now, as he reveals he got in touch with Leia after the First Order destroyed destroyed Coruscant and the other central planets and offered to help bring the criminals of the galaxy around to their cause, and this ties into Zori's redemption. Poe expresses how happy he is to see them, but Lando admits that he has grave news to deliver. Leia is sick and might well be on her deathbed. Anxious to see her, Poe, Finn, and the others abandon the Imperial ship in case the First Order can track it and head off with Zori and Lando to meet up with the rebels and basically to try and give one final goodbye to the woman that has inspired them all this time.